The wind carried grit sharp as glass, rattling the loose shutters of the Hale cabin. Boards groaned under its weight, and the lantern flame inside shivered though the widow's hand held it steady. Out beyond the scrub, coyotes yipped, their cries swallowed by the vast, empty hush of the desert night. Margaret Hale sat stiff in her chair, eyes fixed on the wavering shadows sliding across the wooden floor. Her breath did not quicken, though the sound of hooves drifted from the ridge, slow, deliberate, a rider drawing near. Each beat of iron on stone echoed like a drum, calling trouble home. From town came whispers earlier that day, carried by men who spoke with their hats low and their voices lower. Strange riders, one said, shapes seen against the setting sun, keeping to the high ground. Another swore he heard laughter out in the chaparral, laughter without joy. The sheriff was gone. They all muttered, and no law but luck stood between Hollow Bend and whatever shadows moved along the ridges. The widow's fingers brushed the edge of her window frame, rough wood under her skin, and she tilted the lantern away so its glow would not mark her so clearly in the dark. Dust rose outside, curling into the yellow light of the rising moon. The hoofbeats drew closer, until a horse snorted just beyond her gate. Silence pressed heavy then, the kind that stretches, waiting for something to break. A voice cut through it low, mocking. "Evening, Miss Hale. Might be you're up late for a reason. Folks say you keep things here. Things worth talking." The words scraped against the quiet, soaked with menace. Margaret did not answer. She only shifted in her chair, the corner of her mouth tugging upward in something that was neither fear nor kindness. Her hand moved to the door, her palm cool on the iron bolt. The rider leaned in his saddle. Leather creaked. Spurs jingled soft in the dust. "Don't bother hiding. You'll regret this, sure as sunrise." The widow's smirk held, though no one but the shadows saw it. With a single, smooth motion, she slid the bolt into place. The iron clicked, sharp as a gun cocking in the silence. The rider chuckled, though it sounded uneasy. His horse stamped, restless. From the ridge, another set of hooves answered, a second rider joining the dark. Then another, and another still. Out in the desert wind, whispers turned to shapes. Figures shifted against the horizon, their outlines jagged like broken teeth against the moonlight. Inside, the lantern sputtered, throwing crooked light on the walls. Margaret Hale sat alone, but her stillness carried the weight of something older, heavier. The night pressed closer, listening, and somewhere in the distance, as if the land itself were holding its breath, a storm of boots and guns waited to break upon her door. Boots struck gravel outside, scuffing hard against the packed earth. Low voices carried through the thin walls, rough laughter mixed with curses. A match flared, its glow catching the edges of sneering faces before the desert wind snuffed it to smoke. Margaret Hale sat still, her hands folded on the table, though every board in the cabin seemed to tremble under the weight of the men gathering close. Their leader's voice rose above the others, sharp, cutting. "You think your bolt will hold, widow? We know what's in there. Old debts don't vanish in the dust." The men chuckled, heavy with malice. Metal clinked as rifles shifted, as spurs rattled on boot heels. Outside, a horse whinnied, uneasy, as if even beasts felt the wrongness in the air. Inside, the lantern burned low, painting long, quivering shadows up the walls. The widow's eyes moved to the corner, where a rifle leaned as if waiting. Her breath stayed measured, steady as the desert itself. Another voice jeered. "What's the matter, Margaret? Cat got your tongue? Or maybe you're praying someone's riding to your rescue." Their laughter rang false, too loud, trying to cover the edge of unease that hung between each word. The widow did not rise. She tilted her head, lips pressed in the shape of a smirk that carried no warmth. Slowly, she reached to touch the iron latch again, her fingers brushing the bolt she had already slid firm. The sound of that small scrape of metal on metal carried through the door like thunder. The leader spat in the dirt. "Lock it up tight then. Come dawn, we'll take what we came for. Fire'll smoke you out if lead won't." A chorus of approval answered him, rough voices promising ruin. The crunch of boots shifted away, not far, just beyond the line of lantern glow. Murmurs followed, the scrape of saddle leather, the clatter of a bottle uncorked. They were settling in, waiting. The desert wind moaned against the cracks in the walls, carrying the stink of sweat, whiskey, and gun oil through the night. Inside, the widow's gaze lingered on the chest half hidden beneath a quilt. Her fingers brushed absently at the edge of her black dress, where the fabric had worn thin at the seams. Her eyes closed once, then opened sharper, steady as stone. From outside came a final voice, softer than the others, spoken like a promise rather than a threat. "Sleep while you can, Widow Hale. Come morning, the ground here'll drink." The men laughed again, the sound scattered by the wind, but it didn't linger. Silence followed, broken only by the restless shifting of horses and the crackle of a fire kindling low beyond the gate. In the cabin, Margaret Hale lifted the lantern, adjusted its flame, and set it down slow. The shadows shifted with her, crowding close along the walls. The night stretched long before her, heavy and waiting. Every heartbeat measured against the promise of dawn. The first shot cracked the dawn wide open. Smoke curled from the cabin's window before the outlaws even raised their rifles. One man fell back hard in the dust, blood blooming dark across his shirt. The campfire snapped and hissed as boots scrambled, curses shouted. Horses reared, their screams slicing through the morning stillness. Sunlight spilled gold over the desert, catching the glint of iron drawn in haste. From inside, another blast thundered. A second man pitched sideways, his revolver tumbling into the sand. The widow's shadow cut across the open doorframe, steady, unshaken. Colt Avery barked orders, voice raw with fury. "Circle her in. Don't let the bitch breathe." Bullets hammered the cabin walls, splinters flying. Smoke thickened, drifting out the windows like storm clouds. But every time one of his men edged close, another shot rang out cruelly precise. Margaret Hale moved like someone who had done this before. Her black dress swayed as she shifted, rifle braced sure against her shoulder. Her breath was calm, even as what shattered around her. One outlaw shouted, "She ain't no widow. She's a damn soldier." Colt's eyes narrowed, rage sparking hot. He kicked his horse forward, the beast pounding toward the porch. "Out of my way. She's mine." The door burst under his boot, the cabin filling with morning light and dust. He strode inside, revolver drawn, teeth bared. The widow stood across the room, lantern glow at her back, smoke swirling around her like a veil. The rifle in her hands was empty now, but her eyes, hard, unflinching, pinned him where he stood. Colt sneered. "All them stories, war hero, sharpshooter, hellfire in a skirt. I should have known." Her voice was low, steady as iron. "You should have left with the night." He fired. The shot split the silence, which shattering behind her. But her hand was already on the revolver at her hip, the motion quicker than breath. One crack. His body jerked, eyes wide, disbelief written plain before he staggered. The gun slipped from his hand. He crumpled, dust rising to meet him. Outside, the few remaining men froze. The echo of the gunfire rolled down the canyon walls, fading into stillness. Then came the sound of hooves, retreating, desperate. The gang scattered into the desert, their courage spent. Inside the cabin, Margaret Hale lowered her revolver slow. Smoke curled from its barrel, drifting toward the ceiling beams. Her breath came measured, as it always had, unbroken even now. The dawn burned brighter, its light spilling over broken boards, spilled blood, and the still figure of Colt Avery stretched across her floor. And in that silence, the widow's reckoning stood complete. The door swung open slow, hinges crying against the silence. Margaret Hale stepped out into the morning glare, her revolver loose at her side, smoke still lifting from its barrel. Dust clung to her dress, black against the sharp light, and the wind caught at her hair like a banner torn by battle. The street of Hollow Bend lay hushed. Doors cracked open, faces peered out, eyes wide as if the desert itself had stopped breathing. Men who had whispered in saloons, women who had crossed the street to avoid her porch, they all stared now at the widow, standing unbowed. At her feet lay Colt Avery, stretched in the dirt where her bullet had struck true. His shadow, long and broken, pointed toward the ridge where his gang had vanished. Buzzards circled high, their wings cutting dark against the hard blue sky. The widow did not speak. She holstered her weapon, the sound of leather creaking loud in the still air. Her gaze swept the town once, unreadable, then fixed on the horizon where the desert opened wide and endless. From the crowd, a single murmur rose, half fear, half awe. She drove him off alone. The words spread like fire through dry grass. Children clutched their mother's skirts. Old men removed their hats. No one stepped closer. Margaret Hale turned from them, her boots striking the dust with slow, steady rhythm. She walked past the bodies cooling in the sun, past the trail of blood smeared into the earth, past the edge of town where silence reclaimed its hold. The wind carried her away, its whistle low and mournful, like the desert itself was telling her story. And so it was years later, when old men told tales on porch steps, they always came to this one. They spoke of the widow who locked her door against a gang and opened it again at dawn with no fear in her eyes. They said her rifle cracked like thunder and her pistol struck like lightning, and that hollow bend still stood because of her reckoning. Some swore she disappeared into the canyons, a shadow riding the ridges at dusk, lantern in hand, keeping watch. Others claimed she lived quiet among the people, never speaking of that day, never seeking thanks. But all agreed on this. When the wind moaned across the desert at night, it carried her name in its breath, a warning and a promise both. Margaret Hale, the widow who smiled at death, slid the latch into place and made her stand. And the legend of that dawn would never die.